I'm going to show you how to make fabric bunting from scraps. You will need a paper template, preferably on something a little bit harder, maybe the back of a cereal box, cutting tools, and maybe a self-healing mat, some rulers, sewing machine and thread, an iron and ironing board, a chopstick, fabric for the binding, and finally the fabric scraps. I think this project's really great because it allows you to reuse party decorations and can still be fun without having to use balloons and other items that are only single use and not reusable. First, the paper templates. You can make whatever size of triangle you want. Mine is 3 inches wide and 4 inches tall. It makes a lot of sense to put 2 triangles together. This will save you some space and help you use as much fabric as possible, and I'll kind of show you that a little bit later. It's good to have kind of some options so you can use all your different sizes of scraps. So you've got your scraps. Make sure you always iron everything. It makes everything so much easier. Another great tip is to double up your scraps, layer them on top of each other. More bang for your buck, you can just cut one thing and get multiples. It's also really nice to at least line up one edge. Here I have the bottom edge lined up while the top is a little ski-wampus. That'll just make one more edge that we don't have to cut later. I could cut out lots of triangles with my little triangle template, but I wouldn't be able to fit quite as much on this little fabric. I'd have to do lots of little cuts, a lot of fiddling just to put them in there. But this double template to me is a lot simpler to just cut this trapezoid shape. I'll line up the bottom edge and then slice the other 3 sides of this template. We can remove the template to get that last cut. We're just gonna go from one corner to the other corner. Now we have 4 adorable triangles pretty quickly. Now that we've got all our triangles cut, we're going to place them right sides together. You're just going to sew the 2 long sides. This will make an open side on the top, and that's going to be covered by the binding later. Sew down one side all the way almost to the tip. Then I leave the needle down, rotate it, and go back. Something that makes this go a lot faster is to do chain piecing. And if you don't know what chain piecing is, it's where you don't cut in between each little thing. So I haven't cut the string or anything. I'm just starting on the next triangle, going right on through. And you'll notice that those 2 pieces in the back are still attached by a little string, and we'll just get to them later. This just cuts out an extra step, and you can just keep going and going. I'm doing a 1/4 inch seam here, and you can keep chain piecing until you want to stop and start another set. So after we've finished sewing a bunch of triangles together, we'll just quickly snip them apart. The next step is to trim off the point of the triangle. That's just a lot of fabric. We just want to get rid of that, so when we turn them right side out, they will fold a little nicer and crisper. Pro tip, spending extra money on nice sewing scissors is worth it. Now this is where the chopstick comes in. This makes it really handy. I line up the chopstick with my finger, push it on through, and kind of push this guy right side out with that little point, working that just a little bit. Sometimes you can push through the other end if you push a little too hard, so just be a little careful. And we've got a nice little triangle. Now we get to iron these little guys. Mine are pretty small, so I have to keep my fingers out of the way. These little dog ears right here, we'll snip them right off. They'll get in our way later. Another tip I have is to always have a little small bowl around. Okay, so now this will be the binding. I do this binding exactly like you would do binding on a quilt. It's nice to start with the edge folded together, just like we did with the scraps. You'll see there's 2 bits of fabric here. Again, that just Saves us a little bit of cutting time. I'll fold this again, all with that same edge lined up on the right. And this is just muslin that I had lying around from some other project years ago. If you have a self-healing mat with lines on it, it can make it a little nicer to line up with these clear quilting rulers. I'm just gonna be cutting 2-inch strips. So since the one edge was already all straight, I just need to make one cut. And so now I've got long strips that are all 2 inches wide. Here's how to sew these strips together to make one long strip. You'll set them perpendicular to each other like this, and then sew diagonally across. Put your fingers down and imagine that you've sewn it, and fold it over and imagine that sewn line, and it'll kind of help visualize how that's going to work. This is the same as quilting binding if you want to look at more detailed videos. You can also just sew right across and then fold over, and you'll have a long strip and it'll work fine. If doing the diagonal is a little too wacky, don't even worry about it. Just sew them together. We'll cut away this bulk. When we iron this flat, we'll see that there's still some little dog ears poking out of the edge there, so we'll trim those off too. Keep doing that over and over and you'll get long strips of 2-inch fabric. Since we've sewn diagonally, when we fold it over like this, the seam isn't all in one spot, so that cuts down on the bulk. Now that we've sewn all the strips together and have one long big piece, however long you're going to make your bunting, we will iron it in half to create a nice seam on the top. So here's where it's all going to come together. You're going to fold the binding in on itself again. So now your binding has one folded edge, and you're going to fold both the other edges in and sneak a little triangle in there. So fold the top and the bottom of the binding in so you have clean edges. Sneak the triangle in, space them out evenly, and sew right along that left edge. So you're folding in the edges to the seam. The binding is now folded over in 4 layers. I don't put my triangles right up against each other because it gives it a little bit more flexibility if there's some space in between them. Leave some extra room at the beginning and end with no triangles so you can tie it onto things like tree branches or whatever. And there it is, easy fabric bunting.